A wealthy man compensated a homeless woman to carry his child, yet upon the baby's arrival, he collapsed in tears. Charles Woodward, a man of 45, appeared to possess it all, yet he was missing the essence of what truly counts. He stood in his opulent penthouse on Manhattan's Upper East Side, staring out at the misty skyline. The imposing skyscrapers encircling him resembled hollow mirrors, showcasing a life marked by monetary success yet completely lacking in profound significance. The frenetic stock market transactions, the city's perpetual glow, and the ceaseless whisper of countless souls beneath couldn't quite bridge the deep chasm of solitude that enveloped him. I possess all that one could desire, yet I lack the singular element that would connect me to something beyond my own existence. Indeed, my name is etched in permanence, yet there is no one to utter it with a passion that will resonate through the ages. Un enfant de mon cœur. A cherished part of my being, he mused. A seasoned traveler and master of languages, Charles found himself enveloped in the haunting stillness of his penthouse, perched high above the city that never rests. Even with his remarkable accomplishments, he sensed a confinement brought on by the success he had tirelessly pursued. Each deal he finalized, each dollar that enriched his accounts, seemed like a faint star flickering in the expansive void of his inner universe. Affection, with its tumultuous and erratic essence, was an ocean he preferred to avoid, far too perilous, far too uncertain. What he longed for was something uncomplicated, a seed he could sow in rich earth. A child, not a spouse tethered by delicate vows, but a successor to uphold his legacy in his absence. Something, someone, his very own. He sought to avoid the tempests of emotion. Following 2 unsuccessful unions, Charles perceived love merely as a catalyst for turmoil. He frequently reminded himself that he had no space in his life for yet another emotional catastrophe. His former spouses had only ever been enamored with his riches and the persona he presented, rather than the genuine man beneath. Now his attention had turned to something more concrete, a successor. No more superficial connections or transient promises, just a partner to carry on his legacy without any added complexities. Later that day, as he maneuvered through the bustling streets of New York in his Lamborghini Diablo, Charles came to a halt at a red light close to Central Park. The familiar chaos of the city swirled around him when, out of nowhere, a weathered figure materialized at his window. A young woman, homeless and with pale skin, had disheveled hair and striking blue eyes that seemed to pierce through the world around her. She reached out, her face reflecting a blend of acceptance and optimism. In a whisper so soft it was almost lost to the air, she inquired, "Do you have anything for me?" Charles regarded her with a frigid indifference, his annoyance palpable in each gesture. "Get lost," he snapped, his foot pressing down on the accelerator the moment the light turned green. "Why squander moments on these hardships? My life is far too carefully orchestrated for this absurdity. I have my own challenges to deal with." As Charles navigated the city streets, his mind was a tempest of thoughts, an uneasy sensation clinging to him like a shadow. His thoughts continually returned to the expression in the young woman's eyes. There was an essence present, a resonance that touched a part of him he had yet to discover. Suddenly, he halted a few blocks down, inhaled deeply, whispered to himself, and reversed the car, making his way back to the intersection where she had caught his eye. He discovered her once more, adrift in the tumult of the city, a silhouette merging seamlessly with the clamor. Bringing his Lamborghini Diablo to a stop at the curb, he lowered the window. "Come on in." "No questions," he stated, his voice icy, as if delivering a nonchalant directive. The young woman met his gaze, her blue eyes reminiscent of a sky marred by the passage of time. She stepped back slightly, a look of doubt clear on her features. Life on the streets had imparted lessons in deciphering hidden meanings and fortifying her defenses. With a gentle shake of her head, she responded, her voice imbued with a blend of dignity and careful thought. "I'm not the type you're seeking, if that's what you have in mind." Charles lifted an eyebrow in curiosity. A flicker of emotion danced beneath the surface, yet his face betrayed nothing. "Do you truly believe that a person like me would have any interest in someone like you for that purpose?" His voice cut through the air, firm and resolute. Your appearance doesn't quite evoke any attraction from me. Rest assured, you are in good hands with me. Enough of this foolishness, come inside. I can't spend forever on this. Or would you prefer to roam the streets and feel the chill tonight? She blinked, momentarily stunned by his straightforwardness. After a brief pause, she acquiesced. His demeanor held a disarmingly authentic quality, even amidst its severity. She slid into the passenger seat, her movements deliberate. The vehicle glided smoothly as it rejoined the rhythm of the urban landscape. In the stillness that ensued, Charles stole a sidelong glance at her. She appeared youthful, perhaps in her late 20s, yet it was evident that life had been unkind to her. Shattering the quiet, he spoke in the same impersonal manner he employed during his professional interactions. I have a proposition for you that could transform your existence. His voice carried a serene precision, the tone of someone who meticulously weighs each phrase. I desire a child, without the need for a wife, a relationship, or anything else, just a child. I will provide you with generous compensation and support you every step of the way during the pregnancy. All I require is your womb, after that, you are free to leave. Her eyes grew large, grappling with the weight of the revelation she had just encountered. Is it a young one? She bore a burden she had never faced before. You assured me that you would keep your distance. Absolutely not. It will be accomplished via artificial insemination. What are your thoughts? Anything else would be out of the question, Charles replied, his tone straightforward, as if he were addressing the most rational answer to a practical issue. She became quiet, the clamor of the city receding as her thoughts surged forward. She reflected on the depths of her descent, a broken aspiration, an unfamiliar territory, and now this. Her existence, once brimming with potential in France, now lay in shambles. She was adrift, unanchored by family or heritage, consumed by a profound solitude. She questioned whether he would ever grasp it. As a cultured individual with a flair for languages, he overheard her gently whispering in French, the phrases imbued with a sense of surrender and a glimmer of optimism. La souffrance semble interminable. However, Charles broke into her thoughts. Do you really believe I didn't grasp what you just expressed? I am a worldly entrepreneur, keep that in mind. You mentioned that suffering is endless. He hesitated, his voice remaining frosty, yet tinged with a hint of curiosity. Is this your escape route? With a deep exhale, she allowed her shoulders to droop, conceding to the truth of her situation with a reluctant nod. He continued, his tone as impersonal as always. I have a couple of inquiries. What do you go by, and what are you escaping from? Antoinette Valier. I'm French, she finally replied, her voice quivering yet imbued with a delicate sense of dignity. 5 years ago, I arrived in the U.S., journeying across the Atlantic in pursuit of a future I believed was destined for me. Upon my arrival, it felt as though France had slipped away from my heart. I believed that giving up something would bring me benefits, and that this nation would embrace me wholeheartedly. Yet this city dismantled every part of my former self, devouring me piece by piece. I've experienced profound loss, the job, the aspirations, even the motivation to recall the reasons behind my struggle. Now I roam these streets unseen, without purpose. Charles, keeping his calm facade, regarded her with the same focus he would apply to a high-stakes negotiation, yet an internal transformation started to take place within him. It was merely a flicker, a subtle resonance of a long-lost feeling. Antoinette pressed on, her eyes locked onto a far-off recess of her own recollections. What am I seeking to break free from? She echoed the words, as though seeking confirmation from within. All things. This fractured existence, the hollow vows I crafted for my own sake, these avenues that murmur my shortcomings with each stride. All I desire is to return home. France. At times, I find myself envisioning its vast fields, the fragrance of chestnut trees, and the gentle patter of rain on the rooftops of my hometown. Yet here, aspirations demand an exorbitant toll, and I lack the means to reclaim my passage. A thick stillness enveloped the space between them. Antoinette's words had cut through Charles's defenses. This woman, this unfamiliar figure, faced him with a stark, unvarnished honesty that left him vulnerable. What secrets dwelled within those blue eyes, marked by the trials of existence? She mirrored his solitude in a way that was excruciating, yet her suffering was far more raw and unrestrained. He inhaled deeply, restoring his poised demeanor. His expression grew steely once again. His voice reverted to its characteristic icy tone. "I understand," he said, taking a moment to observe her intently. "I will pose this question to you only one time. Would you be willing to consider my proposal? Will you bear my child and then depart? I will allocate a significant sum for you to go back to France and enjoy a comfortable life there." Antoinette regarded him with a blend of acceptance and solace. For a fleeting instant, she reflected on the countless times she had stumbled, on each struggle she had faced and ultimately lost. This agreement might just be the sole opportunity to escape this perpetual loop. She bowed her head, briefly shutting her eyes, and after a gentle sigh, she responded. "Is there really another option for me?" Her tone was soft yet unwavering. "I agree." Charles nodded with a precision that mirrored his approach to finalizing a stock market deal. "We will proceed with a contract, as there are several terms we need to agree upon. Could you please share your name? Additionally, I have one more question for you. What purpose does a womb devoid of love serve?" Antoinette inquired. "You possess all the qualities needed to captivate someone of your caliber." Charles Woodward, deep in thought and with a resolute demeanor, found it impossible to overlook the significance of her inquiry. He found himself unaccustomed to such direct confrontation, particularly when he was convinced he held all the reins. The engine of his Lamborghini purred under his control, the city's clamor fading into the distance as his gray eyes met Antoinette's. In that fleeting instant, a storm of emotions surged within him, nostalgia, frustration, and maybe even a hint of vulnerability. Yet he concealed it well. Taking a thoughtful pause, Charles inhaled deeply, much like he would before presenting a significant figure in a crucial negotiation. His reply was merely another exchange of language, a pact cloaked in phrases. "My name is Charles Woodward, and you are correct about one thing," he stated, his voice steady and measured as always. "I possess everything I need. Dominance, affluence, authority. People either hold me in high regard or view me with trepidation. Yet, what about love?" He paused, allowing the word to linger in the atmosphere for a moment, before proceeding. "Love is merely a broken agreement, laden with unfulfilled promises. I have experienced that. I have experienced 2 marriages, each of which fell apart completely. They never cared for me. Merely the principles I upheld. The glimmer of luck. The veneer of prestige." Charles inclined his head ever so slightly, as if savoring the sharpness of long-buried recollections. "Develop feelings for someone of my caliber?" he reiterated with a cutting, nearly derisive inflection. "I have accomplished it on 2 occasions. In both instances, I discovered that love is merely a transaction cloaked in the guise of emotion. I have no desire to repeat that experience. I seek a partner who values me for who I am, not for what I can provide. I refuse to bear the burden of hollow commitments or experience yet another unsuccessful connection. My sole concentration is on my successor." His gaze intensified, the authority re-establishing itself, transforming him into the figure who ruled markets, excelled in dealings, and now possessed power over this very instant. He leaned forward slightly, his tone remaining icy yet straightforward. "Text," the young woman remarked with unexpected sincerity, "your words are as calculating as you. Yet, I perceive an underlying truth in all of that, Charles. I observe an individual who not only fears love but yearns for it far beyond what he is prepared to acknowledge. Isolation may masquerade as resilience, yet in time, it inevitably reveals its authentic nature." Charles remained unresponsive. He gazed forward and ignited the engine, allowing its powerful growl to break the stillness that enveloped them. He navigated the streets in silence, guiding her to his residence in the Upper East Side, a formidable structure of marble and steel, impressive yet devoid of warmth, much like its architect. Upon their arrival, Charles silently maneuvered the car into the underground garage, offering no words. Antoinette gazed at the towering structure, a blend of wonder and apprehension enveloping her. It had been years since she had encountered such opulence. It was as if she had crossed an unseen boundary, entering a realm that was utterly unfamiliar to her. Charles emerged, and as Antoinette trailed behind, he halted briefly to cast a glance her way. His gaze lingered on her tattered attire and delicate presence, the striking disparity between his pristine Lamborghini and the weathered woman who had unexpectedly entered his world. With a subtle motion, as though addressing a practical concern, he invited, "Come inside with me." At last shattering the stillness, he guided her into the depths of the mansion. The radiant white marble walls, the grand staircase, and the artworks by artists she had only encountered in books revealed that this was not merely a residence, it was a museum. The chill of the surroundings heightened its sense of isolation, rendering it almost surreal. Charles led her into a generous living space, adorned with a refined simplicity that radiated affluence. A brief directive escaped his lips as a middle-aged woman materialized the instant they stepped inside. "Stephanie, please ensure she looks presentable, clothing, a bath, food, anything she requires. Let's keep this confidential, the rest of the staff doesn't need to be informed." His words were precise, his tone detached, as if he were finalizing yet another transaction. The assistant nodded, her warm smile a striking contrast to Charles's demeanor, as she gestured for Antoinette to follow her down the hallway toward one of the guest rooms. "Come on, let's get you settled," Stephanie said with warmth. Antoinette moved quietly, absorbing every detail of her environment. She understood that this was merely the start of a pact that would change her existence forever. A few hours later, Charles found himself in his office, an impressive space adorned with shelves filled with leather-bound books and expansive windows that provided a breathtaking view of Manhattan's skyline. Seated at a dark wooden desk, he concentrated on the papers laid out before him, as his reliable lawyer, Tom Francis, carefully examined the specifics of the contract. A sudden knock shattered the stillness. "Come in," Charles said, his gaze fixed on the papers before him. Elizabeth, the housekeeper, entered with her characteristic poise, hands elegantly clasped in front of her. "Mr. Woodward, did you summon me?" she inquired. Charles lifted his gaze for a moment. "Indeed, Elizabeth, please escort the young lady down at once." "Certainly, sir," Elizabeth responded, and she left the room with the same composed efficiency with which she had arrived. As time slipped away, the atmosphere in the room became heavy with an almost palpable tension, reminiscent of the stillness that precedes a tempest. Both men, deeply focused on their individual endeavors, remained quiet until a gentle knock disrupted the tranquility. "Come in," Charles repeated, his voice devoid of inflection. The door creaked open, and the ensuing moment rendered both men utterly speechless. In the doorway stood Antoinette, utterly transformed. The disheveled and broken figure they had once encountered was no more. At that moment, she shone with a beauty that seemed to transcend the ordinary. Her hair, now pristine and gleaming, flowed in gentle waves, reflecting the light like threads of gold. Her previously muted blue eyes glimmered with the brilliance of a sky cleared by a tempest. She appeared more statuesque and confident, her stance graceful yet subtle. She donned a modest yet elegant ensemble that highlighted her slender silhouette, and her movements exuded a subtle elegance that hinted at a profound inner growth. Tom Francis stood still for a moment, his eyes locked onto her as if under a captivating enchantment. At last, he found his voice. "Miss," he whispered, shattering the quiet with an unexpected praise, "you are truly breathtaking." Antoinette, who had been gazing downward, raised her eyes at his words. A gentle flush spread across her cheeks as she took in the unanticipated compliment. Despite being taken by surprise, she swiftly found her footing, her demeanor calm and resolute again. Charles, however, sensed an unusual chill creeping down his spine, accompanied by an unsettling pang in his stomach. It was a feeling he struggled to comprehend, or maybe one he was reluctant to confront. Envy, shadowy and relentless, slithered into his heart. He focused on Tom, concealing his unease. "All right," he said, his voice edged with an intensity that sliced through the atmosphere. "Let's move forward with examining the contract terms." His words sent a shiver down the spine as he laid the document flat on the desk. Antoinette advanced, the sound of her heels gently echoing on the gleaming floor. The atmosphere in the room crackled with intensity as the trio advanced, their movements steeped in a formality that suggested deeper emotions lay beneath the surface. Ultimately, the agreement was finalized, committing them to conditions that would surely change the trajectory of their existence. That morning, Charles rose early as he often did, yet an uncommon heaviness lingered in his thoughts. As dawn broke over Manhattan, the sky was adorned with gentle shades of pink and gold, sunlight cascading through the grand windows of his mansion. The bustling city lay beneath him, yet his mind wandered to distant realms. The agreement weighed heavily on his thoughts as he made his way to the wing where Antoinette lay asleep, his footsteps reverberating through the stillness of the house. Yet, what Charles failed to grasp was that regardless of how diligently we attempt to articulate our longings in writing, the heart continues to be an enigma that no text can encapsulate. He tapped gently on her door before pushing it open with determination. His demeanor, as ever, was icy and resolute. "We are departing at once," he declared, his voice brooking no argument. Antoinette, still in a haze, regarded him with a blend of bewilderment and weariness, her thoughts wrestling to comprehend the unfolding situation. "Where are we headed?" she inquired, as she gradually rose from the bed, sunlight pouring into the room and mellowing the harshness of Charles's remarks. In response to the first clause of the contract, he answered with a terse remark. Moments later, they found themselves in Charles's Lamborghini Diablo, the engine growling with the same intensity as the vibrant city awakening around them. Charles navigated the road in quiet contemplation, his expression a mask of inscrutability. Within the confines of the vehicle, the atmosphere was heavy with unvoiced reflections. Antoinette gazed out the window, observing the buildings fade past her like ephemeral specters of her fragmented existence. Thoughts swirled in her mind, profound reflections waiting to be expressed. At times, the silence shared between two individuals can resonate more profoundly than any words exchanged. The vehicle finally came to a stop outside the city's most esteemed fertility clinic, a location that, much like every aspect of Charles's existence, radiated affluence and flawlessness. The polished silver sign outside served as a discreet emblem of exclusivity, immediately identifiable to the elite of New York. Antoinette emerged from the vehicle, her eyes drawn upward to the formidable structure. In that instant, a notion flickered through her mind, transcending the confines of the agreement they were tied to. Bringing a life into the world is always a profound act, regardless of its origins. As this life develops inside me, it will be cherished. This transcends a mere agreement, it marks the onset of a profound connection, one that no document or destiny can sever. Charles, a figure of quietude, strolled alongside her, appearing aloof to the tumult of feelings that started to rise within Antoinette. As they stepped through the automatic doors of the clinic, the immaculate white walls enveloped them, crafted to dispel any trace of uncertainty or reluctance. The opulence and clinical nature of the environment seemed poised to distill the intricacies of their impending actions. Yet, within Antoinette's heart, questions and emotions remained unresolved. The weightiest strides are those made in surrender, as the spirit relentlessly yearns for its expression, even when quietude appears to be the sole choice. A medical team greeted them promptly, their professionalism shining with impeccable finesse. Each elucidation of the procedure was presented with careful accuracy, stripped of sentiment, as if they were merely components of an agreement governed solely by empirical principles. Antoinette silently acknowledged, providing no reply. Embracing acceptance may seem akin to yielding, yet at times, it stands as the sole avenue to progress. The procedure was designed to be quick, though not immediate. Consultations, tests, and medical reviews were meticulously organized to guarantee that everything unfolded seamlessly. As time passed, their trips to the clinic turned into a familiar pattern, each visit intensifying the heaviness of the pact they had made. It lingered in the air, intangible yet inescapable, much like a specter. Certain agreements reach far beyond mere documentation. The commitments we forge within ourselves are what genuinely mold our futures. Antoinette, while she remained silent about her feelings, recognized that her arrangement with Charles transcended mere legalities. It embodied a profound emotional obligation that no written stipulation could ever encompass. Life frequently asks of us what eludes the page. At times, the deepest responsibilities are the ones we willingly take on, even when no one has requested them of us. At last, the moment of insemination had come. True to form, the procedure was as impersonal and methodical as all that Charles had arranged. The pristine, regulated setting only highlighted the deliberate essence of their agreement. Yet for Antoinette, the chill of the room failed to dampen the warmth blossoming within her heart. As the medical team operated with meticulous care, her mind and heart wandered, anchored to the new life she was on the brink of nurturing. For her, the experience unfolding within her body transcended mere medical procedure. It held a profound significance. Gazing up at the stark white ceiling of the clinic, her thoughts drifted toward what lay ahead. A tightness gripped her throat as she shut her eyes. A profound sensation awakened inside her, softly revealing truths she found impossible to dismiss. This goes beyond a mere agreement. This is existence. A life I will cherish deeply, even if it emerged from this pact. She placed a hand on her abdomen, feeling the shift that was imminent in her life. The affection she started to experience wasn't a result of an agreement, but rather the connection that was already developing between her and the life blossoming within her. The journey back was enveloped in a heavy, suffocating silence within the car. Antoinette gazed out the window, watching the city transform into a tapestry of light and shadow, each moment fleeting and ephemeral. At last, Charles shattered the stillness, his voice remaining as impersonal as always. This marks merely the beginning of the journey. Now we wait, he remarked, his tone resembling the finality of a business transaction rather than the dawn of a new existence. She cast a sidelong look at him, filled with apprehension. His detached, matter-of-fact tone left her feeling uneasy. To Charles, it felt as if the recent event was merely another task completed on his carefully curated agenda. Antoinette inhaled deeply, aware that she had words to share. It was something she questioned whether Charles, with his emotional distance, was prepared to understand. Her voice, unwavering yet tinged with feeling, shattered the silence. Children are not merely the result of longing or careful consideration, she remarked, they embody our very essence, the heritage we pass on when we can no longer share our narrative. Today, we've accomplished much more than merely meeting a requirement. A fire has been ignited, one that no contract can ever snuff out, a fire that arises from existence, not from riches or pacts. Charles, who had upheld his unyielding facade all along, felt a tremor of unease at her words. They pierced his being, etching a reminder he could never overlook. A shiver coursed through him, a strange feeling for one who had long suppressed his feelings. For the first time, he genuinely perceived Antoinette, a woman who had the power to awaken emotions buried deep within his meticulously shielded heart. He brought the car to a halt on the empty street, turning to face her. His expression was inscrutable, yet his gaze lingered, as if he were beholding her anew. Charles's eyes, typically frigid and remote, now conveyed a feeling he struggled to identify. "Excuse me. What do you know about the soul?" he asked softly, his voice revealing a vulnerability he had never displayed before. Antoinette maintained his gaze, firm and resolute, her voice serene, carrying the depth of experience from a life lived on the brink. "The essence cannot be bartered, Charles. No agreement or riches can possess it. Affection, whether you embrace it or not, will inevitably weave itself into your creations. Her words resonated profoundly within him, reverberating in a manner he found impossible to dismiss. A long-lost sensation washed over him, sending shivers down his spine. After years of quick retorts, Charles Woodward found himself at a loss for words. The individual who meticulously managed every aspect of his life, maneuvering through existence as though it were a flawless transaction, now stood in quiet contemplation, confronted by a reality he could not negotiate out of. Following the procedure, their exchanges had become sparse, confined to what was necessary. They maintained their space, yet an undeniable awareness lingered, hinting at a deeper connection blossoming between them. Much like a river winding its way to an unknown endpoint, life started to form, yet neither of them could foresee the path it would carve. Fate, ultimately, is a flow that courses within us, its path eternally unknown. At this moment, the fertility clinic in Manhattan stood ready for their arrival. The atmosphere inside the car was thick with anticipation, a palpable tension suggesting that the forthcoming words would irrevocably change the trajectory of their existence. Charles drove in his customary quietude, his expression inscrutable, yet within him a blend of eagerness and an indescribable feeling churned. Antoinette gazed out the window, appearing serene on the surface, yet internally engulfed by a tempest of feelings. The responses of the spirit are seldom articulated. They linger in the quiet spaces that envelop them. The medical team welcomed them with a calm and composed demeanor. A message displayed on the clinic wall proclaimed, "Creation is perpetually a sacred endeavor." A soft murmur of the cosmos. The gynecologist, a poised man in his middle years, welcomed them with a courteous smile. "Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Woodward," he greeted, guiding them to a secluded room. "Today we will discover whether the procedure has yielded positive results." With each step toward the examination room, Antoinette felt her heart pounding in her chest. She understood that this moment would alter the course of her life indefinitely. It transcended a mere medical appointment, it became a connection between the ordinary and the extraordinary. Without understanding why, Charles took her hand and squeezed it gently, an unexpected tenderness in his touch. The heart, upon sensing the arrival of new life, instinctively quickens its rhythm. It acknowledges its own reflection in every new start, Antoinette remarked, her voice imbued with the insight that frequently rendered Charles mute. "Text, Mrs. Vaughn, please take a seat here," the doctor instructed, gesturing to the examination table. Charles stood by the door, his typical aloof demeanor intact, yet his eyes that had only ever been accustomed to figures, now gazed upon the very essence of existence. Antoinette reclined on the table, her body taut with expectation. The gynecologist readied the ultrasound, and the room enveloped itself in a silence that carried the gravity of the occasion. Charles's gaze was locked on the screen, anticipating the outcome of what had once been nothing more than a simple written agreement. Yet, this was no longer merely a contract, it had evolved into something much more profound. Documents might close transactions, yet it is the essence that brings them to life, he mused, experiencing a sense of humanity he hadn't felt in years. The chill of the gel met Antoinette's skin, and an eerie silence enveloped the room. The rhythmic pulse of a heartbeat echoed through the atmosphere, causing everyone to come to a standstill. The gynecologist examined the monitor with keen attention, a gentle smile emerging as he turned to face them. "Life unfolds quietly," he remarked, marked by the steady, timeless cadence of a heartbeat. After a moment that stretched on indefinitely, he pressed on. "Here it is," directing attention to the image displayed on the screen. All appeared to be unfolding as anticipated, yet there lingered an essential piece of information they were missing. The expert conveyed this with a grave demeanor. Charles, whose expression had been a mystery until that moment, leaned in, intrigue evident on his face. Antoinette cast a sidelong glance at him, feeling the tautness in his stance. "What seems to be the issue, doctor?" Charles inquired, his tone firm yet distinctly warmer than typical. The gynecologist offered a gentle smile, gesturing toward several small shapes displayed on the screen. "The doctor revealed that there isn't merely one heartbeat, there are 3. Congratulations, you're about to welcome 3 little ones into your life. Time appeared to stand still. 3 heartbeats, 3 journeys. Antoinette experienced a shiver that coursed through her, as tears of joy brimmed in her eyes, a profound happiness that eluded her understanding. 3 delicate hearts pulsed in flawless synchrony within her. Charles was swept away by a profound sense of happiness and, in a rare moment of affection, leaned in to gently kiss Antoinette's forehead. She instinctively placed her hands on her belly, her mind swirling with thoughts of the new lives blossoming within her. Affection transcends the bounds of formalities and stipulations. It expands, spills over, and assumes forms that even fate cannot foresee. Charles, now positioned by the door once more, regarded her with a fresh perspective, an openness that hinted at a gradual warming within him. He understood that the woman standing in front of him was more than merely the one who held his breath. She was a person who, in an unfathomable manner, was revealing the most profound wonder of being to him. Charles, a man not used to looking after others, sensed a change within himself that afternoon, 3 months post-insemination. Eventually, he found himself positioned in the doorway of the living room, observing Antoinette as she sat on the terrace. The gentle radiance of the descending sun enveloped her in a warm, golden hue. She looked out at the horizon, her face serene, as if her heart had discovered a fleeting moment of tranquility amidst the chaos of life. Antoinette, visibly displaying the initial signs of her pregnancy, raised a hand to her temple and momentarily closed her eyes. Charles furrowed his brow, a hint of worry crossing his features. He had never encountered her in this state, so exposed. She had always seemed resilient, nearly impervious, even in the midst of the cold, calculated agreement they had forged. An instinctive urge welled up within him, driving him to take action. He strode confidently toward the terrace, each step deliberate and filled with intent. "Is everything all right?" he inquired, his tone gentler than normal, yet still imbued with his usual restraint. Antoinette gradually lifted her eyelids, her eyes locking onto his with an intriguing blend of astonishment and tranquility. "Feeling a bit lightheaded, is that to be expected?" She responded with a subtle smile, attempting to minimize her unease. Charles paused briefly, caught in a moment of uncertainty about his next move. Typically, he would have reached out to Stephanie or another member of the team, but this time, an unusual impulse guided his response. Without hesitation, he bent down and, with an unexpected softness that contrasted with his typical behavior, scooped her up into his embrace. As he lifted her, Charles felt not just the delicate nature of her form, but also the profound burden of his own change. Antoinette, taken aback, gazed up at him with astonished eyes. "There's no obligation, Charles. I can walk," she said, her voice carrying a blend of modesty and confusion, yet her words held no hint of dissent. "No," he responded with conviction, yet there was an unexpected gentleness in his tone. "Allow me, if you've journeyed with us to this point in the tale, please drop a comment saying, cappuccino, as a gesture of affection for us." The stroll from the terrace to her room was serene, yet the stillness felt perfectly comfortable. Charles sensed the pulse of existence with each stride he made, her presence in his embrace a bittersweet reminder of all that was transforming. At times, the deepest feelings find their voice in the quietest of moments. As they approached her bedroom door, an unmistakable change occurred. With a gentle push of his foot, he opened the door and stepped inside, feeling the subtle tension in Antoinette's body as it responded to his presence. She surveyed her surroundings, her once calm eyes now expanding in a blend of disbelief and wonder. The space had undergone a remarkable metamorphosis. Every corner now whispered of the fresh beginnings they were on the verge of embracing. Each element in the room resonated with the essence of motherhood. The sweet aroma of blossoms filled the atmosphere, as a large plush toy sat atop the dresser, transforming the room into a haven for the 3 tiny beings blossoming inside her. "What is this?" Antoinette's voice, soft and tentative, pierced the silence as her gaze swept across every inch of the room. Her eyes sparkled with a blend of astonishment and awe. Charles, who had been upholding his typical composed facade, permitted a brief glimpse of vulnerability to surface on his face. "I aim to make you feel at ease," he said softly. "I thought you might appreciate it." His tone was measured, almost uncertain, as if he were reconsidering his own choice. "I wasn't expecting this," she whispered, taken aback by the considerate touches as he gently assisted her in settling onto the bed. Charles perched on the edge, silently watching her absorb the room's metamorphosis. The stillness enveloping them was significant, yet it held an unexpressed richness. "I believe that each new life warrants a place brimming with light," Charles finally expressed, his voice catching him off guard. "A place where love can find its home." Antoinette's gaze pierced through him, sending a shiver down his spine. She then spoke gently, her words resonating with significance. "Love asks for nothing in return, yet it transforms everything." Her voice was soft, intentional, and brimming with feeling. "Even the toughest spirit ultimately allows itself to be molded by it." Charles averted his gaze for a brief moment, overwhelmed by the intensity of her look. A hidden part of him, long confined, started to fracture. The stillness enveloped them, a mutual hush that unexpectedly drew them nearer, surpassing their initial expectations. For the first time, Charles permitted himself to experience a flicker of warmth. The affection he had long restrained was starting to trickle through the fissures in his defenses. His hand stayed entwined with Antoinette's, and as the gentle afternoon breeze wafted through the open windows, they both understood they were setting out on a journey far more profound than they had ever envisioned. Charles stirred from his slumber at dawn, the day's burdens looming over him like a dark cloud. In recent weeks, his bond with Antoinette had deepened into something far more significant than the simple accord that initially united them. Unbeknownst to him, his feelings for her had grown profound, yet today felt unlike any other. Today would alter the course of everything. The mansion, with all its opulence, was shrouded in an unsettling silence. It felt like time stood still as the three lives within Antoinette approached their momentous debut. Charles strode down the lengthy corridor, his mind preoccupied with the significant occasion that awaited him. He hesitated outside her door, and just as his hand brushed the doorknob, her soft voice floated to him. "Charles, I believe the moment has come," she murmured, her voice quivering with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Standing in the doorway, her face shone brightly, a testament to her inner light, even amidst her fatigue. Charles felt a sudden jolt of emotion. Without a moment's pause, he hurried to her side, quietly assisting her to stand and readying himself to take her to the hospital for the pivotal moment that would alter their lives forever. The Lamborghini Diablo's engine growled, yet it paled in comparison to the wild thumping of their hearts. Antoinette, her hand gently cradling her rounded belly, cast a sideways glance at Charles. She had observed his transformation. What began as a simple exchange has now evolved into something much more profound. "I'll be right here with you," Charles said softly, his voice steady yet imbued with determination, as if nothing in the world could separate him from her in that instant. "Thank you, Charles," Antoinette whispered, her voice laced with heartfelt appreciation. The journey to the hospital unfolded in a haze. Upon their arrival, the medical team stood ready and poised for action. Antoinette was swiftly brought to the delivery room, with Charles remaining by her side, gripping her hand firmly. Time appeared to elongate as the contractions intensified. Every breath Antoinette took, every gentle squeeze of her hand resonated deep within Charles's being. "Take a deep breath, Antoinette. You're doing incredible," he said, observing her as she faced the pain and the challenge of bringing not just one, but 3 lives into existence. Time stretched on endlessly. At last, the initial wail resonated throughout the space. A boy, their son. Charles sensed a constriction in his throat, an internal struggle of breaking and mending simultaneously. The second wail came soon after, another boy, then the third. A girl, 3 tiny hearts, 3 new lives, and all of Charles's previous plans felt utterly trivial in that moment. "They're perfect," Antoinette murmured, weary yet radiant, as she looked upon her newborns. Emotions poured from her eyes as her unsteady hands gently touched their delicate features. It was an unexpected love, a sensation that engulfed her entirely. Charles, deeply touched, grasped her hand tightly, his gaze fixed on the tiny forms now being tenderly held by the nurses. For the first time in his life, he sensed a bond with something beyond his reach, something that eluded purchase, control, or foresight. It was existence in its most authentic essence. Yet, in the midst of the profound joy, he observed that Antoinette's tears were not solely tears of happiness, there was a sorrow woven into them, a pain he was only starting to grasp. She wept, for the uncertainty ahead, for the relentless grip of their pact. Soon, she would have to part with these small creatures she had already grown to love deeply, relinquishing them to a life in which she could not partake. Charles, Antoinette wept, I can't bear to part from them, yet this was our agreement, and I will uphold it, even if it shatters my heart. With each word she uttered, Charles sensed his heart shatter further. The exhilaration he had experienced just moments ago was now overshadowed by the stark truth of their agreement. The harsh stipulations of their contract, the unyielding terms and legal jargon, seemed insignificant against the backdrop of Antoinette's sorrowful tears. In silence, Charles bent down and pressed his lips to her forehead while she wept softly. A tightness constricted his throat, an unfamiliar weight settled in his chest. He sensed a profound change within him that would last a lifetime. Much like Antoinette. He could no longer overlook what was genuinely important. Antoinette softly caressed her daughter's face once more, tears continuing to stream down her cheeks. She was powerless to halt them. Charles was unable to do so either. For both, the world had shifted in a manner they could never have anticipated. In that instant, she understood that love, even when rooted in an agreement, could transcend any terms laid out in writing. Uncertainty loomed over her, and all she could do was weep, clinging desperately to the ephemeral joy of the children she had brought into existence, knowing they would soon slip away from her grasp. Charles remained motionless, quietly witnessing her suffering, rendered speechless. He sensed that this couldn't conclude in such a manner, a shift was necessary, yet the path forward remained unclear to him. The morning following the delivery, the tender light of dawn seeped through the hospital room's windows, enveloping the space in a warm, gentle radiance. Antoinette lay back, her weary body finally at ease after a long night. The serene look on her face spoke volumes of the deep contentment that came from nurturing 3 little lives into the world. Charles, usually aloof, had devoted the night to a chair beside her bed, observing her as she slumbered. Despite his efforts to conceal it, the raw vulnerability and fatigue evident in Antoinette profoundly affected him. With the dawn breaking, Charles chose to allow her a bit more time to sleep. He slipped out of the room with a gentle grace, mindful of her slumber. He was in search of breakfast and intended to gather a few items to enhance her comfort. As he made his way back to the hospital, his footsteps resonated with intention along the corridor. Upon arriving at Antoinette's room, he halted, taken aback by the sight before him. The door stood slightly open, and from the hallway, he observed the significant transformation of the room. The space was alive with flowers, dozens of bouquets in vibrant hues adorning every corner. However, what halted him in his tracks was the sight of Tom Francis, his reliable attorney, occupying the chair where Charles had passed the night. A peculiar sensation twisted within Charles as he stood motionless in the doorway, taking in the unfolding scene. Tom inclined his head toward Antoinette, his voice dropping to a whisper. The words Charles caught in his ears struck him with the force of a punch. Antoinette, I realize that everything has unfolded rapidly, and what I'm about to express may catch you off guard, Tom said softly, a tenderness Charles had never witnessed from him before. Yet, I cannot allow this moment to pass me by. Tom hesitated, gently grasping her hand. Ever since our paths crossed, a transformation has taken place within me. You are truly remarkable. He paused momentarily, his genuine intent clear as day. What I experience is genuine. I long to be near you, if you would allow it. I have another question for you. Antoinette, frail from the ordeal of childbirth, gazed at him with a blend of surprise and bewilderment, evidently caught off guard by such a revelation. "Tom," she murmured, struggling to articulate her thoughts. Charles experienced a sudden, intense ache in his chest. The blossoms. Tom's style. The manner in which he grasped Antoinette's hand. It all became excruciatingly evident. His lawyer and friend were present not merely for legal reasons or out of politeness. Tom felt an overwhelming affection for her. With her hand still in his grasp, Tom pressed on. "Antoinette, I hope this becomes a significant chapter in your journey. I wish to offer you even more. I wish for you to experience the opportunity to be with someone who will nurture you, who will provide you with a sense of belonging, free from pressure, free from stipulations, free from agreements. Only we." He inhaled deeply, his eyes unwavering. "Antoinette, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" he inquired, unveiling a breathtaking ring. In that exact instant, Charles found himself unable to restrain his impulses any longer. He nudged the door ajar, entering the room with a deliberate step. The sudden creak of the door caught them off guard, prompting Tom to let go of Antoinette's hand and pivot to confront him, ever the picture of calmness. "Is it Charles?" Tom welcomed him with a serene smile, as if everything was perfectly normal. "Your return was quite unexpected." Charles approached the bed with deliberate slowness, his expression serene, yet his eyes revealed a tumultuous inner conflict. He cast a quick look at Antoinette, her expression mirroring his own astonishment at the events that had just transpired. Then her eyes wandered to the blossoms. The vibrant bouquets infused the room with a sweetness that echoed the essence of Rome. Blooms that had not graced the scene during her departure. "Tom," Charles remarked with a chill in his voice, "the flowers belong to you, don't they?" Tom acknowledged with a nod, maintaining a composed presence in the room. "Ultimately, she is worthy of being enveloped in beauty. Wouldn't you concur, Charles?" His comment, while gentle in delivery, lingered in the atmosphere as if it were a dare. Charles took his time before replying. The atmosphere in the room crackled with intensity, as he grappled with a whirlwind of emotions, jealousy and confusion, feelings that were foreign to him. "I notice you've presented her with an alternative too," Charles remarked, his tone laced with a chilling sarcasm. "Are you considering marriage, Tom?" "In the hospital, right after she has welcomed her new arrival." Tom stood up from his chair with a measured serenity. "Indeed, Charles, I've presented her with something genuine, something free from the constraints of contracts and agreements. I think that's exactly what she requires. A person who values her essence and individuality. Not due to any sort of agreement." Charles's fists tightened as he struggled to keep his calm. He had never experienced such a sense of vulnerability, such a lack of control. For all this time, he believed that every detail had been meticulously planned. He had persuaded himself that he was the only mastermind behind the futures of Antoinette and their children. At that moment, he understood the reality was different. Tom's presence was unmistakable, and his motives reached far beyond simple legality. Charles stated with conviction, "I believe this is not the appropriate moment to impose emotional choices on someone who has recently experienced what Antoinette has faced. She requires some time to recuperate, rather than additional stress." Tom locked eyes with Charles, his expression a blend of defiance and serenity. "You're correct, Charles, this isn't the moment for pressure, but it's equally not the moment to ignore the reality of our feelings. My feelings for her are not something that can simply vanish because you prefer to keep things strictly professional." Antoinette, having kept her silence, gazed at them both with a sense of disbelief. She felt utterly drained and disoriented, and the last thing she required was for two men to erupt into a confrontation in her hospital room. "Tom, Charles," she murmured, lifting a hand to her brow. "Not at this moment, please. All I seek is a moment of tranquility." Both men took a step back, recognizing that the situation was slipping beyond their grasp. Tom stole a final look at Antoinette before making his way to the door. "Take care, Antoinette. I'll be right here if you need anything, he murmured gently before stepping away. As the door clicked shut, Charles lingered by the bed, enveloped in silence, grappling with the words that eluded him. The stillness enveloped them, thick with an unarticulated reality that both were reluctant to confront. Charles took a seat in the vacant chair next to the bed, observing Antoinette as she shut her eyes, engulfed by the weight of all that had transpired. As he observed her peaceful slumber, a singular realization began to crystallize in his thoughts. This had evolved beyond a mere contract, and that filled him with dread. 3 months had gone by since Antoinette welcomed the triplets into her life, a span marked by an immense love for her little ones, yet shadowed by a profound, aching sorrow regarding the inevitable separation dictated by the contract. As stipulated in the terms, the moment had come, the moment she would depart from the mansion, bid farewell to her children, and turn her back on all that had become familiar since she had affixed her signature to the agreement. In her room, enveloped by the sparse possessions that evoked memories of her children, Antoinette gathered the few items she could carry with her. A modest suitcase, almost devoid of contents, contained only the fundamental necessities. The fortune Charles had vowed to provide her held no significance anymore. She had no desire for the money. As she shut the suitcase, an overwhelming ache gripped her chest. Tears flowed down her cheeks as she cradled each of her 3 little ones, one by one, pressing gentle kisses on their tiny faces, fully aware that this would be the final moment she would share with them. The triplets, blissfully ignorant of their mother's turmoil, slumbered soundly in their cribs. Antoinette stood observing them, imprinting every delicate detail into her mind, their serene faces, petite fingers, and gentle breaths. She had signed the contract, believing it would pave the way for her future, yet she never anticipated it would demand her very essence. She reflected through her tears that perhaps remaining a wanderer would have spared her from the torment that was now ripping her heart to shreds. Her affection for those children was profound, encompassing every part of her soul. And although she loathed to acknowledge it, her heart was drawn to him as well. Antoinette made her way down the mansion's grand staircase, each step heavy and deliberate, her small suitcase trailing behind her. Every step pierced her heart like a blade. The clatter of her shoes reverberated through the expansive, desolate hall, rendering the mansion's opulence stark and remote. What had once been a refuge now seemed like a mere echo of the anguish that lay ahead. Approaching the imposing front door, her quivering hand hovered over the doorknob. She found it hard to accept that this was truly the conclusion. Taking a deep breath to fortify her resolve, she readied herself to depart for the airport, bound for a country that had lost its sense of belonging. She was resolute in her commitment to uphold the agreement she had entered into. Yet, just as her hand reached for the knob, a deep voice sliced through the stillness like a bolt of lightning. "Antoinette, where are you headed?" Charles's voice resonated powerfully from the depths of the mansion. She stood still, her body rigid, yet she refused to look back. "Isn't it Tom Francis?" He advanced, closing the distance between them. "You've developed feelings for him, haven't you?" Antoinette clenched her eyes shut, a tempest of anguish and fury roiling within her. She paused to gather her composure before gradually turning to meet his gaze. Her face, marked by tears, encountered his gaze. "You don't understand anything," she said, her voice laced with a blend of frustration and despair. "This is not concerning Tom Francis. Do you recall the final clause of the agreement? I must depart from this mansion and exit the country 90 days following the birth. That is precisely what we settled on, Charles." He halted mere feet away, his breath coming in heavy gasps. Yet his eyes revealed deeper emotions than mere worry. They unveiled trepidation. Apprehension about her absence. In silence, Charles delved into his pocket and retrieved the contract. The document that had shaped their peculiar relationship from the outset. With a steady grip, he presented it to her, choosing not to read or dispute its contents. Rather, he took an entirely unforeseen action. In a moment of intense feeling, Charles started to rip the contract apart, bit by bit, allowing the remnants to scatter across the ground. Antoinette gazed at him, taken aback. "I'm sorry, Antoinette," Charles said, his voice trembling as he sank to his knees in front of her. "Are you aware of the lessons you've imparted to me? Do you recall when I shared that I felt incapable of loving another woman due to the pain caused by two wives who were solely focused on financial gain? You revealed a new perspective, effortlessly. It's sheer folly to despise all roses just because one thorn pricked you," he said, his voice trembling as he echoed the sentiment. "I wish you would stay. The contract and the agreement we reached hold no significance for me. What matters most to me is having you here, with our children, by my side. I'm not requesting your affection or expecting you to alter your feelings. Regardless of your feelings for Tom or anyone else, just remain where you are. Remain for them, remain for the trio." The pain reflected in Antoinette's expression started to soften as she absorbed Charles's unguarded fragility. Charles had always been a figure of steadfast strength and composure, a person who never yielded to anyone, not from arrogance, but because he had crafted a life where everything was meticulously arranged. Yet here he found himself, on his knees, imploring. Antoinette observed him for a moment that stretched into infinity. With a blend of softness and determination, she lifted her hand and delicately rested it on his head. "Amara Tom Sawyer," she remarked with a soft, bittersweet chuckle, her tears now blending with a new feeling. "Charles, how could you possibly be so naive?" Her voice quivered gently as her fingers glided through his hair. "From the moment our paths crossed, my heart has belonged to you." Charles lifted his gaze, astonishment evident in his eyes at what she had just said. Antoinette smiled despite her tears and pressed on. "It has always been you. From the moment you rescued me on that street, from the instant our lives intertwined in such an unexpected manner, even though I was reluctant to acknowledge it, even when you concealed me behind the stipulations of an agreement, my heart has always belonged to you." Still kneeling, Charles sensed his entire universe transform with the weight of those words. What began as a frigid, strategic arrangement had evolved into something far more profound than he ever envisioned. "Antoinette," he murmured, gently grasping her hand, "I love you too. My feelings for you have endured through every moment, even when I attempted to push them away. I kindly ask you to remain here. Not for the kids, not due to the agreement, but for our sake. I desire for us to come together as a family, to intertwine our lives and experiences." He hesitated, his voice brimming with feeling. "It would be the most profound privilege of my existence if you would accept my proposal to be my partner and my one true love." Antoinette gazed at him, her eyes brimming with tears, and without a second's pause, she let the suitcase fall from her grasp and enveloped him in a tight embrace. Charles wrapped her in his arms, their embrace brimming with the desire and warmth they had both craved. "I adore you, Charles," she murmured amidst her tears. Charles drew her nearer, enveloping her in his embrace as he leaned in, their unvoiced emotions culminating in a kiss, deep and fervent, laden with the significance of all that had remained unexpressed for months. Months later, the once desolate mansion was filled with warmth and merriment. The wedding of Charles and Antoinette was a heartfelt gathering brimming with affection and joy. Cradled in their arms were their triplets, each a vibrant reminder that what started as a mere agreement had transformed into something remarkable, a true family. Charles had at last discovered what he had been seeking all along, something that transcended his own existence. As he looked upon his wife and children, it dawned on him that he hadn't merely signed a contract, he had forged a lifelong commitment to love. If this film resonates with you, show your appreciation with a like, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more impactful stories to discover together. Express your emotions and recount your personal experiences. Each word you express serves as a vital component in constructing our resilient and lasting community. Together, we will cultivate a welcoming environment where all can express themselves and forge connections. At long last, prepare yourself for the remarkable tales that are about to unfold. We are consistently dedicated to providing you with the finest choices, rich in meaningful insights while still being enjoyable. Looking forward to seeing you there.